So, I was starting this series last week on Paul's letters, and God intervened last week and broke the video camera so that my sermon on Romans was not recorded. Yeah, thank you. So, this week I was supposed to go on to 1 Corinthians, and so we read a little bit of 1 Corinthians today. But putting Paul and Father's Day together can be a bit of a trick, because Paul has some issues with power and authority and things like that. And then there was the verdict of Philando Castile. For those of you who weren't paying attention, Philando Castile was a young black man who was killed at a routine traffic stop by a police officer. And the police officer went on trial, which is unfortunately also a bit unusual. And then this week the verdict came down of not guilty. And suddenly my 1 Corinthians sermon went in the circular file in the corner of the office, and I had to redo it. Because it's Father's Day today, and within the logic of modern patriarchy, the officer was found not guilty. It's important to understand the logic of the system that we live in. But also to realize that at the same time, we are in a society where there's a crisis of patriarchy. That patriarchy is both under attack and in control at the same time. So it's not like it's gone away or anything like that, but there's all this patriarchy around, but it's not sure. Guys aren't sure what that means anymore. And I think it's worth just taking a little bit of time to think about this. But as we think about patriarchy in our modern American system, it's also important to realize that this is white patriarchy that we're talking about, and not just patriarchy in general. That this is a system, right, where white males are considered symbols of power and authority and safety, and black men are considered dangerous and scary. Where one older man who lived his life under the rules of patriarchy and who was black, named Bill Cosby, is on trial, and another man who lived his life under the rules of patriarchy and was white is our president. Right? And I think that's race, at least partly. Right? Where a white man with a gun is exercising his constitutional authority, and a black man with a gun is, oh my God, he's got a gun. And yet, right? And so this is still white patriarchy we're talking about. And so within the logic of white patriarchy, yes, a young man in his car who says he has a gun is obviously not exercising his constitutional right. He's an object of fear. And within the logic of that system, the officer had the right to do what he had to do. Well, there's many other people obviously commenting on this more intelligently than I'm going to manage, so I'm going to do what I do, which is Bible. Because the Bible has been wrestling with patriarchy, with power and authority for 3,000 years already, so I think it has something to say. And the Bible is basically steeped in patriarchy, but it's a shifting thing. So, for example, if we drop back to the book of Judges, we see patriarchy in the context of tribalism, that the various tribes of Israel are sort of doing their own thing. And if you read through the book of Judges, right, patriarchy is more or less working, not working, but it all falls apart at the end. And it's very clearly patriarchal all the way through, but it's just a mess. And so the very last verse in Judges says, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, if you read the last 3 chapters of Judges, you realize that this was not working. So Israel tried a new form of patriarchy called kingship. Right? And so they started with kings who were so-so. David was mostly pretty good, and Solomon was mostly a complete disaster. Right? And the system just kept going on for centuries, at least a century and a half, 2 centuries. Right? It kept going for a while. And so we read this passage from Hezekiah. And Hezekiah is in a lot of ways the ideal king. Hezekiah was the perfect king. Right? Even in some ways better than David. But it wasn't enough. It didn't save Israel from its enemies. And the impact of the king on the nation is an ongoing sort of discussion in the books of Samuel and the Kings. That lots of parts of the books of Samuel and Kings say, well, if the king is good, the nation is good. If the king is bad, the nation is bad. And that's just the way the system is. And so the king is ultimately responsible for the morality and the faith and the lives of all of the people in it. And that's basically the logic that's running all the way through 1 Kings and all the way through 2 Kings. And then the Babylonians show up and ruin the kingship, destroy the kingship, flatten the country, and suddenly the writer goes, oh yeah, this is because the people were bad. And which is very odd, because the people haven't been mentioned at all, really, in 2 Kings until that point. It's like, the kings did this, the kings did this, the kings did this. Right? But clearly Israel looked at kingship and said, that system didn't work either. Whether it was because the kings were bad or because the people were bad, the system was not working. So the Bible does a lot of thinking about different forms of power and how this works. And once in a while it tries to let go of patriarchy and just can't seem to manage. After the Babylonians took over, for the next many hundreds of years, Israel was under foreign control. And so what they had to learn then is how to live within a system where somebody else ultimately makes the big decisions. Right? So you might have Israelite rulers, but they were always under the Babylonians or the Persians or the Greeks or the Romans or someone like that, right? All the way till 1947 or whatever it was. So 1,000, 2,000 years, 2,500 years, I guess, if you add it all up. Right? So the Bible talks a lot about power and authority, but mostly in a system where somebody else is in control. And so Jesus lived at a time also where the Romans were in control ultimately, but down beneath that was this patriarchy. And Jesus does 2 very interesting things here. The first is that really for the first time in the Bible, he uses the metaphor of father for God very, very consistently. This is Jesus' big metaphor for God. Right? God is Father, over and over and over and over. For those of you who were here for Mother's Day, right, we read this little passage where Jesus was praying, and he used the word Father like 12 times in 8 verses. Right? So it's just this over and over again. But when you think about God as Father, it can be understood in at least 2 different ways. The first one is that, well, since God is fathers, therefore fathers are sort of like God. And so the fatherhood of God can be used to strengthen patriarchy. It's the foundation of patriarchy. See, God is Father, and therefore we fathers are God-like in the way we do things. And yet, Jesus said, no, I call no man on earth father. Jesus said, Father's Day? How dare you have Father's Day? The only place you can celebrate Father's Day is in the context of God as Father. And all of you human fathers, you just don't count. Except, and here's where it just gets complicated. Because Jesus also showed us God as Father in a new way. Because Jesus said, He who has seen me has seen the Father, and I have come to give my life rather than beat you over the head with a stick. So, yeah, we can hang on to God as Father and patriarchy so long as patriarchy means give your life, and patriarchy ceases to mean beat you over the head with a stick, or whatever you happen to have handy. So you get Jesus sort of at the same time upholding and undermining basic patriarchy. And so you can't, you can't let go of either of those and still sort of make sense of Jesus. Because Jesus keeps going Father, 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 Father all the way through. And then, oh, by the way, this is all about serving. This is all about who can be the best servant in the room. Which is always a trick. How do you lead from behind? Or lead from below? Or however you want to sort of make that metaphor. So then we move on to Paul. And Paul's got his own stuff going on. We recognize that. And so we learned that the head of every woman is man. Except that Paul doesn't mean authority when he uses head as a metaphor. Right? And here's the problem we get into when we're in English, because in English, right, head often means power and authority. Doesn't in numerous other modern languages, but certainly does in English, and didn't in Greek. In Greek, head meant source. Right? Paul was talking about how women were fathered by men. All women were fathered by men. And mothered by women. Right? But he sort of, and so he uses this, right, and if you note, and we stop at one point, because after this verse, if you keep reading on in 1 Corinthians 11, sort of his logic breaks down. Because as I said last time, Paul is really good at short little bits, and once he starts an extended argument, it just doesn't seem to work. But it's really interesting. If we had lots of time, we could spend a lot of time on 1 Corinthians 11 and exactly how Paul undermines his own argument in very interesting ways. And then verse 16 comes along and he takes and throws the whole argument in the trash and says, don't pay any attention to this, don't worry about it, it doesn't matter. Right? On purpose, I think. Right? So all of this means that Paul is trying to, again, like Jesus, both uphold and undermine the patriarchy of his culture at the same time. And so ultimately, of course, what he does is he proposes a new system. But the system that he proposes is a bit different. Because it's not a system. The problem with any system is that systems break down. And systems are full of human beings, so they break down. So in the end of 1 Corinthians 12, he says, so let me show you a new way. And at the end of 1 Corinthians 12, the next chapter is 1 Corinthians 13, which is all about, anyone know what 1 Corinthians 13 is about? Love. Right? And most of the time you hear about this, it means there's a wedding going on. Right? But 1 Corinthians 13 isn't at all about marriage. It isn't all about marital love. Right? It's sort of, whatever it is about, it's clearly not about that. But Paul isn't really starting a new system here. It's sort of a meta system. Right? Paul is saying whatever system you're in, and whatever problems are going on, right, here's the way to do this. If you want to, if your system is this and it's trying to do that, right, do it with love. But if your system is totally different and you've got different goals, right, do that with love. And love for Paul is never an attitude. It's never about how you feel about things or how you feel about someone, because love is patient and kind and not jealous and not envious, right? It's about how you act. So whatever system you are in, this is the way you act. And so if you are stuck in a patriarchal system, okay, but here's how to be a good patriarch. To be patient and kind. Let's read a bit of this. Right? Love is patient, love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Right? Paul is really, really good at short hits. So let's change this. Right? Let's substitute fathers. Let's try it. Fathers are patient and kind. Fathers are not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. Fathers don't insist on their own way. They are not irritable or resentful. They don't rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoice in the truth. They bear all things, believe all things, hope all things, endure all things. Yeah, wow, right? So fatherhood is a lot of work. But if you want to know how to do it, there it is. And it looks so simple. So we're in this time of transformation as a society, and we have no idea where we're going. It's not like we're in a cycle where we know sort of we're going to go back to something eventually. I don't think as a society we have any idea what West Virginia is going to be like in 40 years or 50 years, or sometimes we're not sure about next week. Never mind Western civilization, whatever that means in the context of West Virginia. But the transformation doesn't matter so much, because whatever is going to happen, we are called to be loving. And we can, right, and fathers, therefore, right, as part of a patriarchy that is both active and dying, are called to be really, really important in this transformation. Because we both uphold and undermine these systems at the same time. So we are called always to be patient, to kind. Right? This whole list that goes on, and to keep at it. That is the message today.